This is Talk the Devils, the athletic show dedicated to Manchester United. Coming up, it's been another mad week of analysis, investigation on exactly what's going wrong at Manchester United. It's almost been impossible to escape, and unfortunately, we will continue to ask questions about what tweaks Ruben Amorim may make ahead of the Chelsea game. We've got some good news and some bad news in the financial results. Lots of detail in there. We've got a special guest to sort us out on that as usual. I'm sure you know who that is. And of course, we will preview that Chelsea game at Old Trafford on Sunday with results now required urgently. Of course, right. We've got Andy Mitten and Carl Anker here, as usual. But we also have a very special guest because we are talking all things Manchester United's finance. And you know what that means. Hello, Mark Critchley.
All right, lads, how are we doing? Brilliant to be back. Excited to make my YouTube debut, even though I've got rid of the mullet now, which I know you were such a fan of, Ian. And it only means one thing when I'm on, doesn't it? It's number wang. It's calculators and spreadsheets time. So here we go again.
We've got that to look forward to, haven't we? It's brilliant to have you with us. You've written a lot of stuff on The Athletic, though, in recent days, as you always do, about Manchester United. So we'll get into all of that as well. Before we get into the conversation, though, thank you for the lovely feedback on the extra episode. It was audio only, so if you're watching this on YouTube, go and have a look at a podcast feed. You might learn something, you never know. But thank you for the lovely feedback about the extra. Talking all about the Old Trafford atmosphere, Andy and I had a couple of guests with us. Luca Black from the Youth Supporters Club and Pete Boyle as well, who's pretty much a one-man songbook. When we went all over the different aspects of the atmosphere at the ground, the history of it, the future of it, and some brilliant songs from Pete along the way as well. Just to give you a flavour of the feedback, this is Luke from Minnesota. And Andy, this will make you smile. Thank you for the podcast about the atmosphere. At the end, when Pete is done singing his last song and Andy says, I love the idea if you're a fan in Minnesota or Melbourne. I had to stop him right because I am a fan in Minnesota. Podcasts and shows like this make me feel part of the Manchester United family despite being an ocean away. So Luke, thank you for that feedback. And yeah, it was an important conversation, Andy. Maybe not the ideal week for it with everything going on, but it shows that people do quite like a distraction.
Yeah, look at the feedback. Look at the feedback to it. It's something that people care deeply about, and even if they're not able to go to games, they want to learn about it, they want to be educated about it. And I've had a lot of feedback in the hour before I did this podcast, suggestions for what we do at Chelsea, at Sunderland. So there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of momentum, and there's a lot of enthusiasm. So I am pretty confident going forward.
Yeah, look forward to a good atmosphere to try and help move things along for Manchester United on Saturday. And boy, do they need it, Carl, because again, it has been a mad week of everyone having an opinion on Manchester United, and every element of football, it seems, coming back to Manchester United one way or another.
I switched my phone off. Ian, I'm so sorry.
Thought I'd not heard from you.
Ian, Andy, I'm so sorry. I know we shouldn't do this as football writers, but it got too much for me on Monday afternoon, so I just switched my phone off for a little bit, read a book, looked at a bunch of Sesko footage instead.
That is not escaping things, watching Sesko footage.
Well, it was trying to watch stuff without various voices in your ear telling you X, Y, Z was my approach. So phone was off or in the other room for the first 2 days of this week, and then I watched a couple of Champions League games, and there was a point where I put my phone in the other room, so I didn't have the is this team miles off PSG or is it miles off Bayern Munich? I think Andy said he watched the Super Cup right at the start of this season and was looking at PSG going, how's Man United onto this level? So I put my phone away so I didn't have to think about that one as well. So been an interesting week. There's been a lot of noise. My only advice to you is if you're not enjoying the chattering masses, put it down. Go take a walk instead.
Yeah, maybe this show is not the one for you either, to be honest.
We'll be positive. I'll be nice today.
We actually got criticised for talking too much about Manchester United on one of the social media posts the other day, which I thought was ironic for a Manchester United podcast. But Critch, you've written a lot about it. You're at the derby. You've been around the press conferences and recent games. What do you make of all the conversation around it? How do you make sense of what's happening with United at the minute?
How do you make sense? I've been asking that question for 7 or 8 years in this job, to be honest, mate, and I'm still not sure I've got an answer yet. But I feel like it was to be expected to an extent, to be honest. Coming out of that game on Sunday, whatever your thoughts about the performance, you knew that this was going to be a noisy week. It was going to be the first empty week, if you like. United aren't in European competition this week while other clubs are. They aren't even in the League Cup while Grimsby Town are, and they're now in the fourth round as well, aren't they? So,
decent side, it turns out. Yep.
Decent side, not too bad. So there was always going to be this big empty vessel for the noise to rattle around in, and I think we've seen that. We also have to say at the same time, this is, in a weird way, what Ruben Amorim kind of wanted. I mean, sort of wanted. I remember that press conference before the Europa League final in May on the media day, where he was asked, in some ways, even if you lose this game, is there a silver lining to the cloud of you having these free midweeks to work on the system, to work on your principles of play and training, and to really drill this into the players? And he even, we know how open and honest he is, and honest to a fault sometimes, and he even had to admit that, that would actually be a benefit, even if he absolutely wanted to win the final, but that would be a benefit of it. And so you reach this position now where he's had that opportunity this week, and we're going to see the fruits of that labour on Saturday against Chelsea. For as noisy as it's been, and for all the speculation and stuff, I can only say that I think next week will be a lot noisier if there isn't a positive result on Saturday, and that isn't the media creating it. It isn't us trying to generate clicks and hits or whatever, or YouTube views even. It's a fact. It's a matter of fact, because I think fans, players, people inside the club, outside the club, wherever, they all have fair and honest questions to ask about the direction of travel at the minute, and we'll see if we'll get those answers.
Andy Ollie Kay's written a piece on The Athletic about the philosophy of managers. He's applied it to Ruben Amorim and Jose Mourinho, along with a few others. And there's a stat in there, an Opta stat. United have made just 7 in-game formation changes in 42 Premier League matches since the start of last season. So that also takes into account the end of Erik ten Hag's era. And basically that's like half the amount of any other side in the Premier League. It's bottom by, quite a way. So the question is, ahead of Chelsea, will Ruben Amorim tweak it? But that data shows that he's not even tweaking it in-game, let alone match to match. I think the expectation of him changing formation for this game is highly unlikely. Is there any guarantee anyway that things would be drastically better one way or the other if he did suddenly switch to a 4-at-the-back system?
No guarantees in football. There's a lot of frustration around, Ian. Deep frustration, a lot of negative statistics. Manchester United's situation seen through a prism of negativity, because this has been a really poor start to this season. And, Carl switching his phone off, I can totally relate to that. I get messages when Manchester United don't win a game, very strong, he's got to go now, hasn't he? I don't know. I'm just making my daughter a tea. I don't have the answer to that. Times that by 90, and you can see why people start switching the phone off. United fans arguing among themselves as to the merit as whether the coach should stay, should go. We're at that stage in the Manchester United life cycle, and we've been here before. And too many times. I said after Bilbao, the weeks will be long, and this is one of them long weeks. So say United would have beaten Tottenham and we would have played Villarreal in the Champions League this week, we'd be talking about that game now. We would be talking about Villarreal at home before the game, and there's none of that now. So much hinges on the previous result. That's why the Burnley win before the international break, it brought a sense of calm. But it's really wrong that we're judging Manchester United on a game-by-game basis when the mood lurches. And it really does lurch, especially on social media. And again, that's born out of frustration, and fans are absolutely entitled to their opinion. And there's a lot of pressure for the players, for the coach, for people working at the club. The fans have been extremely patient, and yet the fans can contribute to the negativity as well. So there's so many contradictions. And yet before the derby, there was a lot of optimism. So I'll just square that one. So many United fans. I spoke to former Manchester United managers before the derby saying things like, I fancy us today. And I felt reasonably confident as well, at least until the game started. So it is a difficult time. And yet, if United were to beat Chelsea and play well.
Sorry, Andy. I feel pressure with the conversation, to be honest, to ask the right sort of questions to make sure that what we're talking about on the show is reflective of how people are feeling, but also bringing, an insight to what we know and what we think about what's happening at the moment and how United are trying to get through this period and how Ruben Amorim and the staff and the players are trying to make it better. And it's tricky, Carl, isn't it? Because there is so much conversation again this week about the formation. Everything seems to come back to the formation and the formation and the formation. But we've already spoken so much about it, and yet the emails are still coming. Like, will he change? Is this the right way to play? And you wrote an article after the derby where you sort of presented two sides of the argument. Well, the start of this season, there's mitigation. In the derby, they were missing Cunha and Mount, who have been crucial to the way that they've played this season. They've played Arsenal and City, lost to them. Lots of teams will do that this season. They've drawn at Fulham. People will do that as well. They've beaten Burnley, the game that they were absolutely expected to win. And in isolation, that group of games, even the data is quite promising. We were talking about how good the attacking data was ahead of the derby, maybe why people were feeling a little bit more optimistic about that game. And then you've got the other side of the argument, which is Ruben Amorim hasn't just been in charge for those matches. You've got this whole body of work from last season that places Manchester United as the worst side in the Premier League through that period who hasn't been either promoted or relegated. And that's two things that are really hard to reconcile.
It's really tricky. And in theory, I could write two versions of nearly every single match piece. I could write one for the United fans that are going, this is only the fifth match. Calm down. Don't worry. Ruben hasn't had the chance to play his brand new front three and things will get better. There's plenty of football. Or there is the other side, which is going, this is month 10. And I think Andy's hit the nail on the head about how if United had won in Bilbao, we'd be talking about Villarreal. Also, if United had won in Bilbao, we'd be in the Champions League and we'd have two more press conferences. And I think that would also really, really help the conversation. The questions we're asking, because any question we would have had post-derby could in theory have been answered by Ruben in a press conference on Tuesday. Or
if they'd beaten Grimsby as well, we'd have a press conference in a game.
We'd
this
have
week.
a press conference,
right?
It's not guaranteed. They're not contractually obliged to do press conferences ahead of League Cup.
Sometimes send it over to the fans, don't we? But
that was a lovely thing they did last season. Yeah, that's great.
True.
But it's those. It's not just the matches you're missing. It's also the time to talk to Ruben about things. There's also the time we still don't know Cunha's injury status. We have to wait until Friday before we can get an update on Cunha's hamstring injury. We have to wait until Friday until we can have another conversation about Mainu. If you want to have a conversation about Mainu, we have to have another conversation. Wait until Friday if you want to have another conversation about Seshko, which means the mailbox fills up with very well-meaning questions that they're quite hard to answer because I'm massively ambivalent and keep flipping and flopping and flipping and flopping. Is this just game 5 or is this game 47? Maybe. There's been a lot of Amorim's tenure. And yeah, look, it's far too small. It's far too small a sample size for me to assess things like, is Mbeumo going to be successful at Man United? My eyes, my gut is telling me, yeah, things look good. It's far too early for me to say, is this the best version? Is this back three that Amorim is picking? Will that be the eventual one that plays the majority of the games this season? Far too early for those sort of things. And yet, and that's that awful and yet. And this is probably why Ruben is asking for faith, because there are so many questions here that will not get answers until time has passed. And waiting for things to pass in this business is deeply frustrating.
We're also at the stage where they're just words. Do you remember towards the end of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's time, it didn't matter what he said, the team was losing, it's just words. And I think that Ruben Amorim has been hugely supported, but people are losing faith in his words now because they did expect, not unreasonably so, for things to be better this season. Yeah. And the results are terrible. You could argue the performances are better than the results. I'll accept that. I think it's make a stronger judgment 10 league games in. I still think the season's right at the start. I think shouldn't be jumping in on players
Well,
after 5
Grimsby
minutes.
aside, are the results that bad this season? I mean, Grimsby
They're
is a big thing to put
right?
aside.
They're sort of as expected. I was thinking this the other day, that maybe if you wanted to be super sympathetic and generous to Amorim, you would say that take that Grimsby result out of the equation, even if they win the penalty shootout. Of course, it's a huge thing to take out, but they also lost on a penalty shootout. And if they win that penalty shootout, the mood's different going into Burnley. People go into the derby, again, with the same amount of positivity and optimism, but they lose that game. Are we back returning to the crisis thing like as quickly as we have been? I remember, look, not to give people too much of a peek behind the curtain, but we all had a meeting the day after Grimsby where, because, you know, it felt like such a seismic result. And so I'm not trying to downplay it whatsoever, but we had a meeting to be like, well, okay, what do we work on from here? What do fans want to know about? What's the situation? And the thing that we were saying to each other was, I can't believe we're here already. And I think the seismic shock of that result is still rattling around a little bit and is still being felt and is almost colouring a lot of the discourse around it. Because you're right, I think, look at the results in isolation, they're about par in terms of the points they've taken, and you could probably look at some of the performances and say they've been better than expected as well, if you're thinking about Arsenal, right? But at the same time, we came into this season saying that there was very little to no margin for error given the way that last season went. And I think that the results would always need to be a lot better for us not to be having these conversations at the minute as well.
And the
I
flip
can't
side,
believe we're
Andy,
doing
of
another
that,
season where a manager keeps bringing up an Arsenal game.
I think it's been more us, to be fair, hasn't
and
it?
a defeat as well. Yeah.
I also think, Mark, what you've pointed out on is it's not just the results, it's also how Amorim is talking. And the reason why we are in this, hang on, what's going on here, is because Ruben keeps offering his job and he keeps talking about his future and security. Part of that is because, yes, there are some individuals in the press conference room who are asking him about his job, but the Grimsby result was one thing, but the way he was speaking the Grimsby result, we were going, hang on, what's all this then? And then again, after the derby, he's talking about, I'm not going to change, you might have to change the man. So then you go, I can't just write about this result or performance in isolation. I also have to include a paragraph or a little bit of a whisper about the fact that the Manchester United head coach is once again talking about his future. And I know for a fact we've got many listeners here who are teachers, and I'll be really, really interested to hear their feedback about this, in that, well, one of the things I have been told by teachers is if you are in charge of a unruly classroom or a classroom that isn't giving you what you want, you don't show that it's getting to you. You don't start talking about you quitting. You don't let them see you cry, because if you do, everyone starts going for you. And it just feels like we are way too early into a season for Ruben to go, hang on, I'll go off road here. It's like, come on, please. I would like Ruben to be a little calmer, so therefore everything else can be a little calmer as well.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to change either, to be honest. I think he's got the best intentions maybe of trying, but then he just sits there and can't help himself. I mean, Andy, I think you shared this the other day, but the flip side of the conversation about the results as well is that last season, Manchester United won the Manchester derby away. They drew at home to Arsenal. They beat Fulham away. And obviously they won against the promoted sides like they have done this time. So that's the other side of the argument, that those fixtures provided different results, even in the mess of last season. Yeah.
And if you want to judge the body of work from this season, pre-season was hardly convincing. There was a good performance against Everton, Leeds in Stockholm, Fiorentina at Old Trafford, Everton, second half against West Ham. You know, the question marks there as well. And the mood was genuinely good among the players, but what does that count for when the results are not good? And everything is seen through the prism of results. I don't care what anybody says. If you are winning these games playing ugly, the mood would be completely different. And United fans are also watching, you know, Liverpool winning all the time, and again, not unreasonably going, well, their manager came in and he did this and he did that. And it just adds to this sense of deep, continual frustration that's been going on for years, and it adds pressure. You like for like results with last season, it's just another negative statistic, isn't it? Because they were some of the few games that Manchester United did manage to win. We've got tough games coming up. We've got Liverpool coming up, got Chelsea. Maybe a truer barometer will be, how do Manchester United do away at Brentford? how do Manchester United do at home to Sunderland? I think this season has got to be significantly better than last season. And if it isn't, I think you've got a major problem there.
Yeah, and the background to this entire conversation comes in a stat that's also in Ollie Kay's piece on The Athletic. Go and have a look if you're interested in the conversation around philosophies, where he writes that only 22 of the 96 bosses in the top 5 leagues in Europe have been in their job for more than 2 years, which shows you just how much of an instant success expectation there is now for top managers in these leagues. And if you don't get it right, you don't stay there very long. And Ruben Amorim's had a lot of support from fans inside the club as well. But undoubtedly, he's got to improve those results and sharply. Right, let's talk about something else. Okay, we're going to talk about finances. Before we do that, though, I just need to point out Talk of the Devils Live in Belfast is now sold out. It's gone the way of Manchester, so there's no tickets left for Belfast or Manchester on our live tour in the autumn. But if you're in Dublin, you're in Cork, or you're in London, there are still some tickets available for those shows. All the details on how to buy the tickets are in the show description. Have a look at our social media channels as well. But basically, Dublin, Vicar Street, October the 13th, Cork at the Opera House, October the 14th, and London Soho Theatre in Walthamstow, November the 11th. It'd be brilliant to see you there, and thank you to everyone who's bought tickets so far. Right, Critch, this is why you're here. Not the only reason, but it's a key reason. Manchester United's latest financial results have been revealed, and they have made record revenues, and that's the end of the story, isn't it?
That's the good news. Unfortunately, it's not the end of the story. There's a saying, I think, as some of our listeners who have proper jobs might have heard this before, that revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. So let's concentrate on the vanity part first. Record revenues, 666.5 million total record revenues. The mark of the beast, if you like, 666.
Yeah, the Red Devils with a 666.
The Red Devils with a 666.
Number, yeah.
But and forgive me for this, but it goes to show that United are still a financial beast, I think. Despite everything that we talk about, despite the multiple problems, despite bust by Christmas, etc., this is still a club that is capable of generating a lot of money, and particularly so this season in terms of match day and commercial, which were the two big drivers. So commercial, obviously your sponsorships comes into that. There was the new Snapdragon deal, which we believe was around $75 million a year. You had the Adidas deal before that, signed a couple of seasons ago, that's worth 90 million. 80 million this season because there's no Champions League. You remember there was that little clause that cut 10 million off it. But that's always been a huge driver of things at United. Match day as well, 160 million this season. That was a record for an English club in English football history. That is obviously within the context of ticket price rises. There's a lot of controversy about the £66 increase last season. We know that was only for a limited number of tickets, around 3%. I think I'm right in saying, right, Andy? But that is the direction that the club is moving in as well. More hospitality, and there's obviously been the introduction of price categorization this season as well. So it'll be interesting to see how those numbers are affected when we get the first quarter figures for the first 3 months of this season. But just focusing on last season and taking that in isolation, taking the vanity part in isolation, United is still a club that can generate a lot of money at least, but it doesn't necessarily make a lot of money.
Yeah, the wage bill's lower than it's been at any point since the 1920 season as well, which it shows the impact of not being in the Champions League, obviously with the penalties that we've talked about a lot in terms of the player wage, but it also shows how Ineos are working to get the wage bill down. And this is maybe the first real sign that we've had of how much of a difference that's making. Okay, the bad news. What did you say? One bit was vanity and one bit was...
Sanity.
So the sanity check is... not good.
I feel like we always need a sanity check on this podcast quite regularly, no matter whether we're talking about finances or not.
Unfortunately, you might be right, yes.
No, the sanity, I guess, right. So the 33 million loss last season, that's the 6th consecutive year of loss making at United. I think I say the vanity sanity thing. There's a debate within football. Maybe revenue is slightly more important because a lot of clubs are willing to make losses as long as you're achieving on the pitch. I guess the problem at United is they've been making losses and not achieving on the pitch. And this is something that Ineos and Ratcliffe, when he came in, has really drilled down into. You'll remember he was giving interviews in March saying that he wants to see the club be the most profitable club in the world within, I think, by 2028, 2029, around that time, 2030. When you look at these numbers, you can see the potential there for that, but you can see that also a lot of work needs to go into it. This is a loss, despite the fact that the club has been through 18 months now, I'd say, of real financial retrenchment in terms of all the job cuts, the redundancy program, the restructuring that we've seen inside the club. It's been a really difficult and painful process, and yet you've still come out with a loss. One thing I think that's worth noting with it is that they might have actually just posted a small profit if it hadn't been for the exceptional cost that they had of £36 million. And that was essentially the cost of sacking Erik ten Hag, getting rid of Dan Ashworth as well, and that wider restructuring program. So you can see the path back to profitability is there, because that's the difference, making those changes and then posting this 30-odd million loss. But I'm also aware that we're discussing this in the context of another manager who might not be long for the job, and maybe more redundancy payments and compensation payments. I know he said he didn't need to have a conversation about compensation, but we weren't quite sure what that meant, were we? After the Europa League final. So I still think the path back to real prosperity, if you like, with United is long and still faces a lot of hard decisions. It probably means not spending as much on players, being smarter in the market. Recruitment has always been a huge burden. The fact that the club hasn't done it well has been a big reason for the fact that it hasn't been making money over the last few years. You can see the effect of what the measures that Ineos have taken over the last year or so, and you can see the path back to prosperity, as I say, but the path still feels quite a bit long.
Yeah, transfer outlay actually was one of the real eye-catching figures in these set of reporting, Critch, that you've done as well. 279 million in gross payments during this financial year, which is the largest by Manchester United by £60 million. In fact, in world football, only City and Chelsea have ever registered larger spends in a single year. And Chelsea, I think we can probably discount considering the way that they do business. So, that's a huge, huge sum of money on transfers. And obviously, like we've said, not all of that money has been spent as years have gone by. Andy, how do you read all of this?
Manchester United is still a huge financial beast. If you dig more into the numbers, merchandise, for example, is doing really, really well. Again, there's going to be changes there. The merchandise department has lost key people. United fans are just waiting for this giant to wake up again, and yet the revenues are still really, really big. Imagine how big they'd be if Manchester United were good again. I think this season's figures will be impacted by no European football, not just from broadcast, commercial, but those gate revenues that we spoke about. Then again, ticket prices are higher, but every single event at Old Trafford creates millions of pounds. And back to the point about the long weeks, there's hardly any events this year. You can put the women's games at Old Trafford, you can play the 21s there, but you're missing out on that massive cow which can be milked from the club perspective. Just look at the queues outside the megastore. You don't get them if there's no games. People don't fly over if there's no games. You go in the megastore 2 days before a weekend game and it's busy. And then there's tour guides, and then there's the Red Cafe. Old Trafford is its own industry, and all that goes. I think there's encouraging signs with the figures. The retrenchment, which Critch talks about, is a lot of people suffered from that, and I think we should remember that. Good people have lost their jobs who've done nothing wrong. It's also clear how expensive it is when you're firing off and paying off very, very expensive members on the football side, and that's something to consider if people are talking about the future of Ruben Amorim, and then the whole cycle like that brings in. If another manager comes in and wants to spend hundreds of millions, where's that money coming from? But the simple answer is Manchester United have got to get successful on the football pitch again. It's just common sense. It all flows from that, because you get more broadcast, you get more commercial, you get more match day revenues. It's actually amazing that Manchester United are still so successful given how poor the team have been. in finishing 15th. But there were those little sweeteners last year. The games against Lyon, against Athletic Club, they were all big events, and we lose all that as well. So there's definitely a financial prudence. The merch sales are still incredibly strong globally as well. Absolutely knock rivals out of the park, to the point that people might be saying, how can you do this? You know, it's because Manchester United are massive. I always remember Liverpool, who are probably the closest to Manchester United, and I don't think Liverpool are as big as United. I always remember they'd finished 7th about 2014 and sold out a friendly game in Melbourne, 90,000 people. And that was a Liverpool in their real low point. It wasn't a 15th, but it was a real low point. So the legacies can endure, but for how long? You know, if United are not to win anything for 4 decades, then you're absolutely missing out on new supporters.
I can't be sat here for 40 years doing these podcasts.
I don't think that'll happen. I am an optimist. I do think that the club is so big it can't continue to fail. You know, I still see merit in what they're trying to do now, and merit in the summer signings, which are only happened a couple of months ago. But my point is, you see now globally Manchester City shirts, whereas you wouldn't have done. Younger fans tend to be attracted to success. Manchester United will absolutely benefit from the legacy and the great history of the club. And when it comes good, and it will come good, it will be so sweet. But we just need to know when that's going to happen.
Well, it would be nice, wouldn't it? It goes back to the conversation we had with Luca at the end of the extra podcast, where we talked about how to engage and enable young fans to support Manchester United, attend matches at Old Trafford as well, to ensure that there is that next generation of fans who are just as passionate about United as the previous ones. Critch, we are waiting for the final summing up of the year, aren't we? Which we tend to get maybe 24 hours after this financial posting. So potentially by the time people are listening to this, they will have had an opportunity to read an article by you or Chris Witherspoon or someone like that on The Athletic, rounding it all off. But when those final numbers come through, what's the aspect that we need to be looking for, do you think?
There's a few interesting things, you're right. So the way United do this, because they're listed on the New York Stock Exchange, is they file an interim thing which has all the key figures that we take apart, and that's up until the 30th of June. Then there's a big fuller report with a lot more detail in there, but it also will mention important facts and figures that have happened since that date. And the things that we're looking out for here really are, number one, the revolving credit facility. Now, I'm going to remind people what that is. We call it the company credit card on here quite a bit, and I've had a little bit of pushback on that. But I think this is the
people do not like that.
They don't like that whatsoever.
Comparison. Do they not like that? Sound like
am
Graham
I speaking
Taylor.
to financial people here? I don't even know if I'm a financial person at the moment. So
you're a financial person, Critch. So
that's good enough. Okay,
sure.
So I'm going to keep on calling it the company credit card for now. All right, until someone tells me something that's simpler and better to use. But United essentially can borrow up to £300 million at any point. Up until the 30th of June, we know that they had borrowed £160 million. And if you remember, around the 30th of June, were they still trying to get Brian and Mbeumo done? And the message was, it'll be Mbeumo, and then after that, it'll be sales before any other signings. They did Mbeumo. They were haggling. They finally stumped up the 2 or 3 million or whatever it was to make that deal happen. And then they went and signed Benjamin Šeško for €75 million. So there was a discrepancy between what we thought would happen and what eventually did happen. The reason for that might be that they've made a drawdown on the revolving credit facility, and if they have, that will be included in the full report. There was also a filing at Companies House around that time which suggested that a change had been made to the revolving credit facility. We think either the amount that United could borrow, the maximum amount, had been extended, or they'd extended it so that they had longer to pay it off. Either way, they would have given themselves more opportunity to spend more money this summer. And so we should get details in this fuller account. We'll also find out how much money they still owe for players they've already signed at the club, transfer debt essentially, which is on top of the debt that we talk about in terms of the Glazers and the revolving credit facility itself. You remember Ratcliffe talking about how they were still paying for Casemiro, still paying for Anthony, still paying for Højlund. It's that money, these instalments that they owe. We'll find out the rough estimate of that figure as well. And we'll also find out roughly how much they spent on Sesko, on Le Mans, on the players that they signed after that day, on Mbumo too, because he joined after the 30th of June, didn't he? So we'll get a fuller picture of what United spent this summer, and importantly, I think, given all the noise that there has been about the finances over the last year or so, we'll get a better idea of how they paid for it as well. Because in the past, when we've done these podcasts, we have sort of accused United of paying for players on the never, buying on tick and hoping that things will work out, that they'll qualify for the Champions League and then they'll be able to afford it one day. And we were told, or the impression we were given, was that that would change and that it would be more disciplined going forwards. Now, I feel like something might have changed over the summer. Clearly, we were expecting players to go out and then players to come in, but that didn't happen. And there was a real push for Sesko, and there's a real push and a recognition, I think, that they needed to get results now. I think when the final report drops, we might be able to see that in black and white and in ones and zeros in terms of how they managed to acquire the money to be able to do that, and that'll be really interesting.
The demand for match tickets is spectacular, considering how bad the team is. There's literally no club in the world who has such a demand for tickets to watch a team who often loses matches. It was put to me 5-6 years ago, Manchester United is structured not just to play Champions League football every season, but to reach the quarterfinals minimum of the Champions League every season. And when the team stopped reaching those levels, that's when the debt started kicking in. It's pretty clear. The club were going out, spending big money, paying top wages, and there's been retrenchment, which Critch talks about since that point. Equally, they know that in football, you've got to often speculate to accumulate. And so Jim Ratcliffe, in his several interviews, talked about how there's a very clear correlation between how much you spend and how successful you are. And Manchester United clearly decided that they've gone for a striker. They needed to go for a striker. There'll be people sat here going, well, why didn't they go for a midfielder as well? But I think the three main players who came in and the goalkeeper, they were greeted enthusiastically by supporters. So they know the areas they've got to improve on. The question is, will there be improvements? We certainly hope so.
Yeah, okay. Well, we will wait the updated article, Critch. If indeed it's not out yet, it could be out. Go and have a look on The Athletic for that. Let's talk about football again, unfortunately. I say unfortunately. Let's talk about the women's team just for a moment, because they beat London City Lionesses 5-1 in their second WSL game last weekend to top the table in the women's game. So thank you, Mark Skinner's side, for bringing some positivity to this show. And please don't let us down later in the Champions League qualification against Brann. They are 1-0 down from the first leg in Norway last week, but they're in action on Thursday evening at Lee Sports Village, looking to make the league phase of the Champions League. So good luck to them. Okay, Carl, how important is this game for Manchester United against Chelsea on Saturday at Old Trafford?
It's very important. It's very important, if only because Chelsea haven't enjoyed coming to Old Trafford for some time now. And
Absolutely not.
It'd be a very good opportunity to hand the crisis baton over to Chelsea. I watched part of their game against Bayern Munich.
Is that where we're at now? If we win, it's the other team who's in crisis.
Andy was talking about why was United's fans so confident heading into the derby. One, they hadn't played for 2 weeks. And two, because City were holding the crisis baton because they had lost before the international break.
True.
This is it. I always go back to the line from Duncan Alexander about how every week there is one crisis club and the trick is to never be it. Unfortunately, there's always one crisis club in the top six, and you don't want to be that club, and you don't want to be that club just before the international break, because then you get two weeks of faff. So, Chelsea, not in a great place right now. It feels weird to say about a football club that has spent more than $1 billion on players, but one of the takeaways from that defeat to Bayern Munich is they might need another striker on top of everything. Very strange. João Pedro is good, and especially good at linking up play, but he's perhaps not the combative element that so many top six teams are trying to get in their front line. So for United, you want to win because you don't want to have another week of conversation about the system and tweaking the system, and you don't want to have questions about is Šeško Rasmus Højlund Mark II, and you don't want to have questions about the midfield or Menu all over again. You want to have just a little bit of stability, particularly as we are, in theory, after the Chelsea game, entering some easier fixtures. If you can get a result against Chelsea, then you might finally enter a situation where Ruben Amorim wins back-to-back Premier League games.
Yeah, it's been a while since United did it, let alone with Ruben Amorim in charge. And it's been even longer since Chelsea won at Old Trafford. You mentioned the record against them, Carl. Andy, get a load of this, right? Unbeaten against Chelsea in the past 12 meetings at Old Trafford in the Premier League. It's a record that stretches back to May 2013, which means that in the post-Sir Alex Ferguson era, Chelsea have never won at Old Trafford. So despite everything that's gone on during that time, the boys in blue from London town have not managed to take 3 points back to Stamford Bridge. In fact, their last victory at Old Trafford was in Sir Alex Ferguson's final season in charge, and it came after United had already been crowned Premier League champions. The victory before that was in 2010, a 2-1 win when Didier Drogba was a mile offside, but there was no VAR to rescue the officials on that occasion. And before that, they had a win in 2005 after they'd already been crowned champions at Old Trafford. So you actually have to go back to December 2001 for the last truly meaningful and proper defeat to Chelsea in the Premier League, it seems.
If Chelsea are in crisis, I wouldn't mind a bit of that crisis. They're the current world champions. They've not lost a Premier League game, and they're playing Champions League football. I can remember mocking their strategy on this podcast, and I think I'm pretty wrong on it. They are world champions.
Are you going to say this for the next 4 years now?
No, because they hold on to it now for 4 years, don't they?
4 years, yeah. You see,
right.
I know you keep saying it with the trademark.
I won't say it
enough
again,
of it
Carl.
already, to be honest. Yeah.
The only time I'm going to say it is every time Manchester United beat them, because we've just beaten the world champions. So hopefully, after the game at Old Trafford on Saturday evening, we will be saying that.
I am being a bit mischievous, obviously, with reading out the results, but it is remarkable that they've never won at Old Trafford since Sir Alex Ferguson was in charge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Remember the game last year? That was the first league game post Ten Hag, if I'm not mistaken. That was when Ruud van Nistelrooy, it was a draw. It was seen as a settling result. I think Bruno Fernandes scored that day. Would I take a draw this weekend? Would you lads take a draw? You know, I think Manchester United are the ones who need a result more than Chelsea. And Manchester United really, really, really need a result. It annoys me seeing Cole Palmer, the fact that he's at Chelsea, he's done so well at Chelsea, given he's a Manchester United fan from Manchester. Garnacho, I'm sure we're going to talk about him. I think that's really interesting as to the reaction he gets. I think that depends on...
What do you expect?
I honestly think he divides Manchester United fans. I think I'm pretty good at reading the fan base, the fan culture, and I think there are some who really sad that he went. I think there are plenty who think he's an absolute idiot, and it was a good thing to move him. I think his actions will also play into, you know, how he's perceived. If he's seen to be a showman, if he's seen to be big time, that'll absolutely go against him. If he's respectful, that'll work in his favour. If he starts tweeting nonsense at half time, or any of his family members do, then everyone's just going to be like, good riddance, we did the right thing here. It's the cliche, but it's a massive game. It is a massive, massive game again, because we're at the point in the Manchester United coach cycle, and no matter how patient the club wish, you know, the club are urging patience. To like, going back to what Critch was saying about Manchester United being par so far this season. Unfortunately, when you lose the games such as Grimsby, that Grimsby result was horrendous for so many reasons.
Yeah.
And that then plays into to this game as well. You know, you can't lose against Chelsea. That'd be 1 win in 6, San.
Yeah, well, like Carl said, you know, or Critch, I can't remember who said it now, but they were right that next week will be even worse than this week if United were to lose this proud record at Old Trafford against Chelsea that I'm going to keep cheering myself up about mentioning a few more times.
That Drogba goal was so offside.
Oh, it was so offside, yeah.
And it basically decided the title that season.
Yeah, well, it definitely swung the pendulum in their favour in that game. Yeah,
it almost makes you pro VAR, doesn't it? That goal was so offside. It almost makes you
that's kind of why it was introduced to remove the absolute glaring ones. Let's not go down that route. We've already nearly done an hour. We'll be here all day. What do you think about Garnacho, Critch? I mean, what do you expect from him? He's been off the bench in the last 2 games for Chelsea. Enzo Maresca said he's not quite up to speed yet, so I'm guessing that means he won't be in the starting lineup. I mean, it'd be a hell of a statement by Maresca if he was to start him at Old Trafford, and I think it could be something that could galvanise the atmosphere actually inside the ground, and maybe that helps Manchester United to have a focus that's not their own team in this game in a way.
I was thinking the other day, what if he scores the winner and then celebrates by telling Ruben to go find a new club? I think just did the reversal of the famous meeting after the Europa League final. I don't think that would go down too well. I think Andy's absolutely right that he's somebody who divides opinion. I have to say, when it was building to a head with Garnacho, I felt that he should stay. I was somebody who was a bit more sympathetic towards him. I always felt that he was a United player. He had that arrogance. He had that attitude. He felt like somebody who would excite me when I was watching a game. I think there were a lot of times last season when he wasn't playing, he would be somebody who you would notice his absence. United looked a worse team without him on the pitch simply because he was a threat. And for a 20-year-old to look, his decision making was very questionable at times. There was clear flaws to his game, but I felt like he was somebody who, given the opportunity, if he was bled into the team in the right way, and he did play a lot of games in his final couple of years at United, and maybe too many, a bit too much responsibility. But I always felt that he was somebody who could grow with the club and would be a United player for years to come, and one that fans would really connect with. And I remember even back in January when there was the first sort of murmurings about him potentially leaving to Napoli, the game against Rangers in the Europa League, and fans were just singing his name. He hadn't really done anything in particular on the pitch to warrant it, but it was simply because there was that noise and speculation. There was real support for him. He was somebody who needed that support, and I think was a little bit sensitive to that support. You remember him scoring, was it against Leicester in one of Ruud's games where he scored and then turned to the fans because somebody had a word with him outside that he didn't like? He was somebody who took a lot of that on and took it quite personally, I think. So, yeah, a divisive character. But like I say, I think that could feed into the atmosphere on Saturday as well. If he does start, I expect that, he's almost like the cliche, the player that you love to have in your team, but you'd hate to play against. And I can see him becoming that later in his career. I think that in the end, it was probably the right decision, though. United needed to move in the direction that if they were going to back Ruben Amorim, they needed to back him to the hilt. And that's what they did, in effect, by pushing Garnacho out in the end, along with the other members of the bomb squad. I still look at that price, £40 million, and think it could have been a lot higher if we're coming back to the financial stuff. I remember speaking to people around United a year earlier than that, where they were saying they reckoned he was an 80 million talent. And even if that felt quite a bit high, somewhere in between that mark was realistic, I think. I know it was the most that United ever got for an academy player out of the system, but it still felt like money was being left on the table there. So I think there's a little bit of sadness about him leaving. At the same time, I think a lot of fans don't mind seeing the back of him. I think he divided opinions that much to that extent in the end. And it'll be, like we keep talking about how noisy next week's going to be. I think Saturday's going to be noisy if he starts, and especially if he scores, as I said.
Yeah, I feel sad about Garnacho as well, because I think if the club are producing through the academy, whether he was brought in during that process or not, if they're helping to produce a player of that quality, there should be a place for him in the Manchester United first team. And obviously there are massively different aspects of this conversation, and there'll be different aspects of this conversation with other players in the future, with Kobbie Mainoo, for example, or anyone else for that matter. But fundamentally, I think it's a good thing that United produce these sort of players, and there should be a place for them in the first team long term if they want to be there. So yeah, it's just sadness really that he's going to be in the blue of Chelsea in some ways, but there's obviously lots of reasons why that is the case and why that deal was done in the summer. Carl, let's talk about the red team. Who's going to play? It's funny now that we're not, the lack of press conferences, but also the lack of information, it seems, as well at the moment. We don't really know whether Cunha's fit. We don't know whether Mount's fit. We think Dalot might be fit, but we're not sure. There's been a sight of Lisandro Martinez training on grass again, which is getting people, something good to talk about. I don't think he's close to returning just yet, but there is a big question mark again about who plays. Does Kobbie Mainoo come in? Is that the curveball? Is that the tweak that Amorim brings ahead of the weekend?
Question marks all over the pitch. And those question marks would continue to exist when the team isn't getting the results you need and the team isn't settling. I think the fact that Ruben is not mentioning Mount in his press conferences leads me to believe he might be further away from fitness than Cunha, who's brought up once or twice. Last Friday, he said if you bumped into Cunha at Carrington, he'll tell you he's ready to play right now. So
get him in.
If it was a hamstring injury and you take the 2 weeks for the international break and you take the week of the Manchester derby, if it's not a bad hamstring tweak, we are getting close to him being able to play football. So he might be back. Diogo Dalot, he missed the international break through his own volition, so he might be close to returning.
I think it was minor, wasn't it?
Yeah, so those two seem like they'll be closer to coming back. The midfield now, really big question marks for me. You know, I like talking about midfield, regrettably. So it was Ugarte and Fernandes in the derby. I don't think Ruben will do that again for this game. I think it might be the return of Casemiro in the starting lineup there. And then if Cunha can't play, we might see some scope for maybe Xerxes as the 10 to just try and bully that Chelsea backline. So those are my picks.
Do you not want to see Bruno there? Is it not time just to put an end to it and stop playing him in midfield?
I would like to see Bruno there. I just have a feeling Ruben is more inclined to play Xerxes there instead.
Andy?
Be interesting to see which goalkeeper starts.
There's that too. Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah. I think Dalot would be back, but then where does that leave Mazraoui, who is also back? I'd love to see Cunha back. Does Šeško start? Lots of very pertinent questions. Ugarte, I think Carl would be right on that. I would be surprised if he started.
Do you think Bruno plays further forward? Is that the tweak? And
I'd like to see Bruno, the Bruno of last year, more, because I think he's more effective when he's further forward. And amid the raft of negative stats, I've also seen negative images, and one of them was his heat map compared to previous seasons, showing how much more advanced he was. Bruno Fernandes has got the ability to be Manchester United's top scorer and a creator. And with this system, I think you need more bodies forward, because you're relying on your two wing-backs, if you like, almost to become strikers if they're getting forward enough. And that leads us back into that stat about Dorgo having more touches in the opposition area at the weekend. That's what this system wants. And I think Bruno Fernandes should be one of those forward players. I don't
You're pulling a face.
I don't know.
You're pulling a face
because I'm worried. That's why I'm pulling a face, because I'm worried about the game. I'm worried about the formation. I'm worried about the football. United tend to start pretty well. And I think for all the frustration, the fans will be right behind it. It'll be another full house. At kickoff on Saturday, be like, and it's a 5:30 as well. There may be one or two fans who have a drink before the game and have a little bit of extra time. That all adds into the atmosphere. Getting there early as well, because there's been congestions outside Old Trafford. The weather forecast is horrendous, which delights me, because I've got a new United We Stand Out. I worry about the frailty of Manchester United. The second half against Burnley, and Chelsea have absolutely got the players to damage Manchester United if Chelsea go ahead. I just think any confidence in this new system is so fragile at the moment. Well, it just would be wonderful to play well for 90 minutes and to win 2-0. Just be brilliant for that to happen.
For 90 minutes.
Okay. To be perceived to have played well. No, you're right.
Cheeky.
You're absolutely right.
They can play well for stoppage time and win 1-0 for all I care. That's fine by me.
They can play appallingly and win by an own goal. I don't care. They just need to change the narrative some way.
You're both right.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is a good place to leave it or not, but we're going to finish there on Talk of the Devils. Thank you, Critch, for being with us and bringing some semblance of sense to that financial conversation, a bit of sanity needed. And thank you, Carl and Andy, for being with us as always. Thank you for watching and listening. Let's hope for different against Chelsea. Let's hope that things can change. Kevin got in touch with us on email, devilspod@theathletic.com, if you want to do the same. He says, I'm sending this having listened old school to the post-derby episode. I don't know how you have the fortitude to keep making what seems like the same episode again and again, but you do, and you make it interesting, so thank you. So please, let's hope that the pods over the next week after the Chelsea game are different and we don't have to do it all over again. You will be waiting maybe a little bit longer than usual after the Chelsea match because we're recording in the studio on Monday morning. So maybe look out for that late afternoon, early evening on Monday. But wherever you're watching the game, enjoy it. Let's hope it's something positive to talk about. And thank you again for your company. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of Talk of the Devils. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've not done already, like the video, and also get involved in the comments too, and click the bell to make sure that you never miss an episode with myself, Andy Mitten, Carl Anker, and Laurie Whitwell. There's also our social channels at TOT Devils on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Thanks for watching.